I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is Render the Darkness. Tried the creepy eyes. Did it work?
I didn't even notice. Was that what that was? Okay.
I kind of like it. That's my new thing.
Alrighty then.
Alright, so today we are still in California. Just kidding. We are in Colorado. It's been a morning. Sorry. We're in Colorado. I'm so sorry.
California.
It's not the case. We're on. Is this our second Colorado case? This is our second Colorado case. So I'm going to be a little bit of a hypocrite here on this episode for anybody who has watched any of our previous episodes, and I had to make this case a two-parter. There was just no way to cut it down, and even with making it a part 2 case, I still did not come in anywhere close to the amount of details that I could have put in here, but I still think it came together really well, and it's a really good case. For anybody that hasn't heard of it, the case we're covering today is the tragedy of Nancy Pfister.
Last name sounds familiar.
I had not ever heard of this case. It was a very interesting case to get into and read about and learn about. So I'm going to give you our fun fact, and then we're going to get into it. Fun fact for this episode is that giraffes hum to communicate with each other. I also read that it's thought that they also talk in their sleep, which is adorable.
Oh, I've never heard a giraffe hum.
I haven't either, but I would like to. I may Google that. I'm sure somebody in the world has recorded that and blasted it on the internet because, you know, everything else is on there.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get started on the case. Nancy Pfister was born in Orofino, Idaho on July 4th, 1956. Her parents' names were Art and Betty Pfister. Nancy had 2 sisters, Suzanne Pfister and Christina Pfister, which I think her last name is actually now Smith. Before Art and Betty officially married in 1954, Art had purchased the Lazy Chair Ranch on Buttermilk in Colorado. Before buying the ranch, Art had built a house in Aspen, Colorado, where he would ski as often as he could while he worked as a salesman. He loved skiing. He loved skiing so much so that he would go on to open a ski resort in Aspen.
Oh, go Art.
Yeah. Oh, he and Betty also met while they were skiing in Aspen, so he had that connection to skiing as well. He might love his life doing it.
Oh, sweet.
The Pfister family would go on to be credited with helping to grow and transform Aspen into what people know and love today.
Nice.
Betty was also quite accomplished. She was a pilot and played a role in planning and the construction of the first heliport to ever be put in Colorado. And that was done at the Aspen Valley Hospital.
Dang, go Betty.
Yeah. She also founded a rescue group called the Pitkin County Air Rescue Group in 1968. The rescue group is still running to this day. Betty retired from the group in 1991 and passed away in 2011.
Oh.
She also founded the Aspen chapter of the 99s for International Women Pilots. She was inducted into the Colorado Aviation Hall of Fame. And Art and Betty also began the tradition of what was called the Old Timers Party, which is now hosted by the Aspen Historical Society.
Oh, cool.
So really accomplished people. They did a lot, and they did a lot for the community, and they contributed in many, many ways. I don't usually include so much of the backstory of the parents, of the person that the case is about, but I just thought it was important to kind of emphasize the level of prominence that the family name had in the town. So I went ahead and included some of that. That brings us to Nancy's life. Although she was born in Idaho, she was obviously raised in Colorado in a town called Basalt. Out of the 3 girls, Nancy was the middle daughter, with Suzanne being the oldest and Christina being the youngest.
Middle daughter.
She's the middle. I'm the baby.
The baby.
And a baby. Growing up, Nancy was all about being outdoors. She was described as a bit of a tomboy as a child. Must be a middle child thing. Of course, her dad being a rancher at heart, Nancy grew up around horses and cattle. And one unique skill her dad, Art, had was the ability to find underground water through something called dowsing or dozing.
Oh, is that the little
Yeah. So the idea is that someone could use a forked or split switch and locate underground things like minerals or water, they would follow the bend or the rotation of the forks, which was said to happen if a person was close to or standing over the resource. Art was credited for using this skill to find several wells around Aspen.
Nice. Yeah, they have like the dowsing rods, I think is what they call
them.
Yeah,
they make those now. Yeah, I think I've seen our grandpa do this a time or two, or at least try to. I think
he used like sticks.
Yeah. I think I remember watching him. I don't know if he ever successfully found anything. And to be fair, they lived right next to a creek, so there was kind of water everywhere. So even if he had been successful, I'm not sure it would have been a skill per se. It's like saying, if you hold a spoon over cold water, it gets cold, and then somebody holds the spoon over cold water, and they're like, look at my skills. It's kind of that same. But he tried. I remember watching him do that. Anyway, I think they were called, which I thought was kind of interesting, I think they were called witchers or water witchers was the name they had. And they may still be called that to this day.
Yeah, apparently you can also use them to find spirits.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that either. See, like that. Energy. Maybe that's what it picks up on, is some kind of like an energy field or something. I mentioned that because Nancy thought she also had this skill.
Okay.
And she used to kind of go around and boast and brag about being able to do it. Even though I didn't find anywhere where anybody had any reports of seeing her actually do it.
Oh.
But
okay.
As far as Nancy's relationship with her sisters, from what I understand, they always struggled to get along, especially after Betty passed away.
Oh.
Partially because when Betty was diagnosed with dementia and after Art had already passed away, Nancy became Betty's caretaker. Nancy held a lot of sentimental value in the things in the home, and she was worried once her mom died that her sisters would kind of stake claim to it before she could. So mostly what she wanted was Betty's jewelry and her clothes, so she could wear the stuff around and kind of be reminded of her mom.
Yeah, okay.
Although Betty and Nancy did tend to butt heads, she was still her mom. And one of the main things of Betty's that Nancy wanted was her pearls, which she would get, and it was said that she wore them always. She never took them off. It kind of became like a trademark of Nancy, that she always had these pearls. Another point of heavy contention after Betty's passing was the fact that before she died, Betty had her will set up to ensure that none of the girls would have access to their life insurance for at least 2 years after she passed.
Oh, wow.
Which was multiple millions, like a couple of $1 million. That I also read that other than the 40 acres that Art gave each daughter, like every time they would turn 21, he would give each kid 40 acres. Other than that, Art and Betty didn't give their kids any of their other assets. And they were very strict with their money. Like, they had a hired lawyer that monitored every penny that went in and out of their bank account. I also read in another source that Art actually gave Nancy a monthly allowance. But again, that was only in one resource, so I can't confirm or deny if he actually did, in fact, give her a monthly allowance. But I did read that he did.
Okay.
All the other assets that were owned by Art and Betty were set up in a trust, and out of fear that the girls would lose or waste the assets and the money, they wanted to make sure they couldn't just get their hands on it immediately after they passed away.
Yeah.
Because, they were very successful. Like, that ski resort was booming. Plus, he had the ranch. Plus, like, they just were very successful people, and they didn't want that to get squandered,
Yeah.
And this wasn't the only reason the sisters couldn't seem to get along. Money and assets, they did play a big part, but Nancy and Susan were said to have never gotten along. They never liked each other from the get-go. And which is really sad because they always either lived with each other or like within a stone's throw from each other, and just they either fought or they didn't have a relationship. And I also read in another source that Nancy was the big reason why Christina chose to move away from the family.
Oh.
There was also the fact that Susan and Christina believed that their parents' distrust of the girls stemmed primarily from Nancy's behavior and choices and regular frivolous spending that she often partook in. Nancy was known to portray herself as a high-rolling rich girl, but in truth, her money was her parents' money. And it was watched very closely, as I said before, and their lawyer's name was Andy Hecht, I believe, Hecht. Nancy would also grow up to have 2 children. She had a daughter named Juliana and a son. I could not find her son's name, so I did not put it in here. Nancy never married, but I did read that she was engaged to Michael Douglas for a small window of time. So, like the actor,
Michael Douglas?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yep, absolutely. So she was well socialized and hung out with many celebrities and other high-profile names. That was just one of the added benefits of her parents owning a booming ski resort in Aspen, Colorado, where everybody wanted to go in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
Some of the big names that she was known to rub elbows with and date a few of was Hunter S. Thompson, Jack Nicholson, John F. Kennedy, Goldie Hawn, and of course, as mentioned, Michael Douglas.
Nice.
I also read that she actually dated Jack Nicholson for a small period of time as well. In fact, she I don't think I put it in here, but she ended up hosting a show where she would go around and show properties and stuff in the area, and I think she actually did like a tour of Jack Nicholson's house at one point.
Oh, nice.
Her father did end up building her a really nice cabin in 1991, which is where she would raise her children. She was known to donate money to random causes, which she didn't really have to throw around, but she would do it. I should mention that she wasn't just totally relying on her parents. She did attempt to go to college, but would ultimately drop out and return home. When she did return home, she did go to work at the ski resort. I think she mostly worked as a tour guide. I'm not 100% sure about that part, but I do know that she did go to work at the resort, so she wasn't entirely relying on them. She did make her own money.
Okay.
She just lived well above her means. Nancy was also known to live life kind of fearlessly and a little loose, if you will. She liked to partake in adult activities such as drinking and drugs, and heavy on the drinking. There's also a few other people involved in this case, which is Kathy Carpenter, who is a super important person in this case. She was by all rights Nancy's best friend. She seemed to be the polar opposite of Nancy. She was shy, she was quiet and recluse. She wasn't in as high of a class socially as Nancy was, but that never really seemed to bother Nancy. Kathy was also known to be a very hard worker. She worked at the Alpine Bank, which is where Kathy and Nancy actually met. After her dad passed away, Nancy had gone into the bank to make a deposit or withdrawal, and Kathy was her teller. And from that point forward, she wouldn't let anybody else be her teller at that bank other than Kathy.
Okay.
So they met in 2007, like I said, after Art passed away. Kathy became Nancy's most trusted ally, and literally, like, she would put all of her trust and dependency pretty much on Kathy. After her mom and her dad passed away, like I said, she was estranged from her sisters. She didn't really have any family. So Kathy kind of became that for her.
Yeah.
She trusted her so much that when Nancy would be off traveling, sometimes for months at a time, she would entrust Kathy with her safety deposit box. She would also entrust Kathy to wire her money. Nancy would also regularly rent out her house when she was gone, and she would trust Kathy to collect her rent money.
All right. So she had a lot of trust in this lady.
A lot of trust in this lady. I will say, though, Nancy and Kathy's relationship was not without its problems. The ladies argued off and on and got into quite a bit of legal trouble together.
Uh-oh.
And it was said that at certain points in their relationship, Nancy was not very nice to Kathy. But despite that, they always seemed to make up and find the calm in their relationship.
Okay.
Nancy also had the habit of throwing around her money to things that weren't really things the money was going towards. She would claim she was doing things for charities, but then she would use the donation money for things that weren't charity related. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. She did donate parts of it, which kind of put off the image into the public like she was a trusting person, because it, on paper, it looked like she was doing what she said she was doing, even though she wasn't always doing what she said she was doing. So with those traits of hers combined, it might lead people to believe that Nancy was well off and also an easy target for, let's say, perhaps a renter to skip payments under the notion that Nancy didn't really need the money.
Ooh.
But that couldn't be further from the truth. She really did need the money. Nancy did not have any of her own money that was just free-flowing to her. As we already talked about a little bit, she was pretty locked down on that. She had to verify any penny of that money that belonged to her parents that she wanted to spend. And because of that, she had a habit of doing things like skipping out on tabs at bars and restaurants, sticking her friends with the bill after inviting them out to eat. And if she were ever out on a date, she absolutely would not pay. So, and she would not just go order a sandwich or something. She would order like a T-bone steak followed by 5 glasses of Chardonnay. She would make that bill 5 times higher than it should have been for a lunch bill. And then she would just stick she would either bail on the bill or she would stick whoever she was with to pay the bill.
Well, that's not a good habit to be making.
No. And like I said about the dating, she fully believed it was the man's responsibility to wine and dine her. It was not her job to pay for her own dinner if she was on a date.
No.
She also had a habit of planning and throwing really lavish parties, but then throwing the bill off on other people. Like I said before, these are the cases where she would act like she was doing some kind of a charity event for a specific cause, and then she would get the people to donate, and then she would use the money to pay for the lavish party that she was throwing.
So she was doing a little bit of fraud there.
A little bit. So that brings us to the next 2 names of this case we need to talk about, which is Trey and Nancy Styler. Let me give you a small and brief idea of who they are and how they're connected to Nancy Pfister. Trey's real name was Dr. William Styler III, and he was a very well-known and respected doctor in Denver who would go on to become the chief of the St. Joseph's Hospital Department of Anesthesiology. Okay. He was said to have come from a wealthy family. Nancy Styler had her own accomplishments to brag about. She was a nurse who had trained in France, where she specialized in anesthesia and general medicine. Both Nancy and Trey had a son together who was named William Styler IV. As you can probably put together, obviously Trey and Nancy had met at the hospital. They were both practicing anesthesiology. Nancy and Trey were both described as sweet, charming, and were always pillars of their community. Nancy began learning about raising and growing and becoming an expert in growing Victoria water lilies. The couple had very eccentric taste, and for a long time, they had a lot of money. They were also known for throwing lavish parties, and they really lived a life of luxury for a very long time. Unfortunately, the Stylers' luck seemed to come undone rapidly when Nancy had to have a double mastectomy due to breast cancer.
Oh.
Trey was said to have experienced some bad luck of his own when a backhoe fell on his leg.
Ouch.
He was left with permanent damage from this, even after having multiple operations.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. He desperately tried to continue working, but his injuries just proved to be too great. He couldn't stand for extended period of time, so it just was not feasible for him to continue working in the hospital. It's even said that his bones in that leg and that foot were very sensitive and really highly susceptible to breakage. Like they could break for no reason. He could just step wrong and one of the bones in his foot would break.
Golly.
Like, he did inherit quite a bit of money when his mother passed away, which was after his injury had occurred. I read it was also in the millions that he inherited. I think it was like $2 million, I think, that he inherited. A little less, maybe. But that was only in a couple of resources that I read that. In the other resources, they didn't really give an amount, per se. They just said that it was a healthy inheritance.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with it being at least $1 million. At least.
Yeah.
It was enough that it allowed the couple to continue to live their comfortable lifestyle despite Trey no longer practicing medicine. After Trey stepped away from medicine, the couple attempted to start a printing company. But that did not work out well for them. Didn't really take off at all. In the 90s, while he was still practicing medicine before his injury, Trey had joined a group called the Colorado Anesthesia Consultants, or CAC. 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 That's what I'm going to call him. You probably were supposed to say it CAC, but I'm going to call him CAC.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm going to say bless you to her.
Hey.
Welcome. They're actually the ones who voted him to be nominated as chairman. So, he had a good relationship with these guys at this point.
Good.
Once the printing business tanked, Trey would attempt an endeavor of joining forces and was hired to work with a computer company called Enterprises to create a software program for CAC that would help the doctors with the scheduling. I think the idea was to kind of sync the doctors with their patients a little more intimately.
Okay.
I think the program was going to be called ASAP. However, Trey would miss not one, but 2 deadlines for delivery for the software, and by December 2002, CAC, or CAC, would fire Trey, and that would not only sever his ties and connections with the medical professionals in the group, but will also tarnish his reputation. My goodness, that was a bit challenging sentence. This seemed to be really the start of the downhill path the Stylers would find themselves on. You'd think that they were already on that slope, but it just continues to go down from here. Obviously, the issues that he was having with the programming and missing the deadlines has created a lot of animosity between CAC and the Stylers. Primarily Nancy, believe it or not, who actually began claiming that Trey didn't miss the deadline on his own, but rather some members of the CAC didn't agree with the spreadsheet that Trey had created due to the way the billing was supposed to be set up. She accused members essentially of stealing money. A case was opened with CAC claiming Trey owed them a software program, and he was given yet another deadline, which he also missed.
Dang.
It was mid-2003 by this point.
I wonder why he's missing them so much.
I think that after his injury and having to step away from the medical field, if I remember what I read correctly, I think he had started drinking a little bit and was just kind of a little bit falling off the rocker in that sense.
Gotcha.
I don't think his focus was where it should have been in that moment of his life. By August of 2003, CAC and Trey were in a vicious lawsuit because Trey continued to decline all settlement offers, and there were many that CAC offered. But because he kept declining them, they became more and more aggressive. Trey kept the lawsuit going until he couldn't afford to pay his lawyer anymore, and even then he would attempt to go on to represent himself. Remember, that was 2003. So then in 2008, he would get in a car accident. This would end up costing Trey an undisclosed amount. He was definitely at fault because he rear-ended the lady. So he would end up being held liable for the driver's medical bills, which I read in one source were around $200,000, and in another source I read it was around $300,000.
Ouch.
The case would be settled the following year in 2009, and as for the lawsuit between Trey and CAC, it was dismissed. So he walked away with nothing.
Man, he should have took the last offer.
Should have, would have, could have. He then went on to sue his ex-lawyer, who was representing him during the CAC lawsuit, for malpractice and wanted his $600,000 he had paid the lawyer back. That lawyer's name was John G. Powell. And Trey actually did win a judgment of almost $900,000.
Oh, dang.
But again, luck was not on the Styler's side. Powell would file for bankruptcy. Therefore, Trey would never receive a dime of his judgment money.
Wow.
By this point, Trey's health, and physically and mentally, seemed to be rapidly declining. He had threatened to unalive himself a few times by this point. Not to mention the strange behavior he was exhibiting. Nancy was desperately trying to find work during the length of his lawsuit with the CAC, and signs of sheer desperation began showing up in Trey because he was, his wife was out there desperately trying to make a living for them, and there was nothing he could do to help her.
Yeah.
So, out of desperation, he started doing things like showing up to old colleagues' homes in the middle of the night to beg them to testify that he had been wronged by the CAC, and obviously they would not do that. They would not help him. And, just other things like that were completely out of character for him. During this time, the couple also lost their house and began renting properties here and there, and then this brings up the point in time of, let me restart that sentence, and this brings us up to the point in time of the Stylers' relationship with Nancy.
Okay.
I don't know why I had such a hard time saying that.
It happens.
The Stylers decided that the best place for them to start over and have the potential to make money was Aspen. Guess who was also located in Aspen and had the kinds of prominent connections with the rich and famous that might just help Nancy Styler in her newest endeavor to make her and Trey wealthy again?
Who?
Nancy Pfister.
Oh.
Nancy Styler's plan was to open her own wellness spa. She would go on to give up her medical career and get a license to be an esthetician. I think I said that right. Which is a fancy word for a skincare specialist.
Okay.
She wanted to do facials and Botox and massages and stuff like that. The problem was that Nancy knew she couldn't just do that. Even though she had the equipment, they didn't have the equity or anything to back them because, all their legal woes they'd been going through. So she was hoping she could get hired at a parlor or spa that was already in Aspen. She especially knew in a town as developed as Aspen that housed many high-class stores, she was going to have to establish herself and grow her name in order to really make any progress to get clients to be able to even justify opening her own spa or her own salon.
Yeah, okay.
Step one to this plan was finding a place to live in Aspen, and it just so happened that Nancy Pfister was looking to spend the winter in Australia, so she was seeking a new tenant to rent her house while she was gone.
Okay. Australia.
Yeah. After failing to get a tenant by reaching out to her personal social circle, she decided the next best way to get results was to take an ad out in the Aspen Times newspaper. The minute that paper hit the Stylers' hands, Nancy Styler called Nancy Pfister. The Stylers were actually already staying in Aspen in a temporary condo while they were house hunting, but they were still going back and forth from Aspen to Denver at this point, which is about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive.
Huge.
Okay, so starting from this point on, because we have two Nancys, I'm going to refer to them by their last names. You will hear me say Nancy Styler a lot more than you'll hear me say Nancy Pfister because there's two Stylers as well. Oh. So most of the times when I'm talking about Trey Styler, I say Trey. So if there's a part where I just say Styler without a first name from this point forward, I'll be referring to Nancy.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. When Styler and Pfister began talking, as soon as Pfister mentioned that she had a greenhouse, which if you remember, Styler's past of growing water lilies and gardening, which was the happiest point of her life, that was it. The two women hit it off. Pfister invited them to come on over, and they did. Everything seemed like a golden ticket for the Stylers by first glance. Pfister was offering for them to use the whole house and arrange it however they wanted, and was inviting them to go to dinner and offering to help them get adjusted in the town before she left for Australia, and just being incredibly welcoming to the couple.
Yeah, sounds super nice.
It sounds incredible, right?
Mm-mm.
And with the way their luck had been going, they thought the same thing. Finally, a break. Finally, something good is happening.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to end part 1.
Why? Why?
Because if I don't, we're going to have a 2-hour case.
Okay.
Well, maybe not a 2-hour case, but well over an hour if I don't stop it here. So I figured I would cut it smooth in the middle. Right before we get to the drama.
Aha.
Let's cut it off. Drama, episode 2, titled Drama.
The dramas.
No, it's just titled The Tragedy of Nancy Pfister Part 2, but it is where all the drama comes in, and it is where we get into the main points of the case.
Mm-hmm.
This was more of like a character development and a introduction to how they ended up crossing paths in their lives to begin with.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Well, I'm curious to see what's going to happen.
Me too. What's going to happen?
I don't know.
Let's find out.
I really don't know.
We'll find out Tuesday.
Yes, we will.
Tuesday will be the
today
part
is Friday.
2. Yeah.
Part 2 will be out Tuesday.
Yep. So you'll find the part 1 today and part 2 Tuesday.
On the day of twos.
The day of twos.
Day of twos.
But we hope you come back for part 2. We hope that you really enjoyed part 1 with the character development and getting to know all these. I don't want to say character development. I mean, it is character development in the sense that you're talking about who they were as people.
Yeah.
But saying character development makes it sound like a play or something, and I don't really.
Yeah, just, getting to know everybody.
Everyone, yeah.
Their past, their lives.
Who they were, what took them on the path they were on, and how they crossed and met and all that fun stuff. But like I said, we are on Colorado, so we've still got plenty of states to go. If you have any case recommendations, suggestions, you like what we do, you like how we tell it, you like who we are, let us know. I mean, not that you like us, but let us know if you have a case recommendation. Let us know if you have a case recommendation. If you do, we still have plenty of states to go, and we will be happy to do one on something that you guys recommend.
Yep.
We'd love some input.
We will do's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We take input if you like us, if you don't like us. Something we could do different.
What?
You hate the plaid. You hate the stripes.
Don't say that. I like this stuff.
Why say we would do anything about it? I just have to tell us.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, I hate your plaid. You're going to come back and she's going to have like her face painted plaid. She's going to have like a plaid hat.
Yep, I will do it. No. I better not say that because then people might just do it just to see
Just
if
to
I'll
see
do it.
if you'll do it. That would be hilarious. Somebody please do it. Anyway, that's our time. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We hope you had fun. Well, yeah, fun.
Yeah. I mean, because nothing, nothing really bad's happened yet. So it's like,
have fun with this one.
Yeah.
Don't have fun with the next one, but have fun with this one.
Yeah.
Be educated on the next one. Learn something. Entertained, if you will. But not fun. But this one, fun.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. We are Render the Darkness. I like it. I'm going to do it. It's my thing now. I hope you enjoy it. Oh.